The flames danced in the lenses of my sunglasses as I stood arms crossed, witnessing the smoldering hulk of my tractor sizzle and spit in the blackened grasses. Laura, 10 feet away, continued yelling at the firefighters as if they were her personal servants. Her face, red hair frizzed with heat, voice cracking from yelling. She complained about how I must have known better than to leave that eyesore in a residential neighborhood, how it spoiled neighborhood's beauty. Then, in a surprise turn that almost made me laugh out loud, she yelled that I'd brought fire into our city. What she didn't realize was that the man she was accusing worked for years, demonstrating cops how to sniff out arson. And what she didn't actually know was that this fire was already telling its secrets to me. Fires disclose things. This one was yelling. It started 3 days ago when I got in my mailbox. A pastel-colored envelope with a sparkly HOA sticker that seemed to go on a wedding invitation. There was a letter which started with "Dear Resident," which made my eyes roll. It detailed offenses such as visual blight due to my tractor. The same tractor I parked on my own land, part of the family ranch my grandfather built in the 30s. Apparently, now it was bothering the community. According to Laura, I was halfway through my coffee spreading bread when a knock rattled the door, sharp, rude, like a salesman selling trouble. I opened it, and there stood Laura, mid-50s, with blonde highlights carrying a clipboard as a club. She didn't wait for an invitation, stepping forward, eyes scanning my porch for infractions. As the acting president of the Pine View HOA, she told me that she had grievances against my property. I asked whose property since my land wasn't in any HOA. Her smile tense poisonous because she said the new map last year positioned my ranch under their border. I asked if this map had been authored by God himself, because county lines don't shift just because someone bought a new printer. She quoted me a $1,000 fine paid in 5 days or to court. I hung up on her when she started quoting bylaws as if reciting a sermon commanding her to depart. She replied that it wasn't done. I told her it was for the moment. She stalked off, anticipating the gravel would yield. That evening, I parked the tractor by the barn and took the land out for a walkabout. All was good, my hound. Cinder slept by the veranda. I ate. Supper, watched the news, and retired. Arson does not advertise. It creeps in the silence. At dawn, I was awakened by the smell of burning rubber, strong and sweet. I ran outside Bootshafen and watched on fire, engulfing the tractor, licking the barn. The hose was useless. Someone cut the water line. My fire extinguisher was a joke on the flames. Neighbors called it phones, glowing in morning fog. Someone yelled. Another came with a shovel. I waved them off. It was too late. The fire crew took 12 minutes, effective but useless. The tractor was a ghastly shell. Tires melted into pools. The barn smoked, but was cinder hovered around me, ears back, speechless. Then Laura arrived, flip-flops, slapping smoothie in hand, yelling at the firefighters about the dangers of farm equipment. How I'd dismissed warning. How I'd done that to myself, I said nothing. Just stood watching her eyes scan the wreckage without shock, her fingers tightening that cup as a lifeline. When the fire was put out, I walked through the charred terrain. The V-shaped imprint alongside the back tire. The gunk on the grave light wasn't accidental. It was lazy on purpose, like someone read through an arson manual and ignored the warnings. There was a plastic circle alongside the burned tire. A red remains of FarmTech fuel were still visible. I didn't approach it. I knew 2 things. This was arson, and the criminal picked the wrong building. I didn't call the sheriff or insurance. I learned from the fire, letting it talk. This wasn't revenge. It was about truth. One burned clue at a time. Laura's name would end up on a report, not a clipboard bound for court or prison. I knew the rules and played them to the end. The next morning, I was in my kitchen with coffee and a notebook, gazing at the burned tractor. Smoke clung to the barn like an injury. I wasn't angry, infuriating clouds, judgment. I felt the cold intent of examining fires that left families to ashes. I walked the site again during the day. The burn trail was real, starting low at the tire, tracking along behind the rubber like a wick. Behind a tree 12 feet away from me, I found a melted jug cap thrown too soft to hide. Smaller boot prints than mine, women's tennis shoes. Maybe Laura's size were there. I snapped. I tagged it and held the cap in my garage fridge for the lab. I wasn't filing a report yet. Small towns have small cases, and Laura had contacts. At noon, I went to the co-op. The one store that carried farm tech jugs. I asked the clerk. Ethan, surveillance footage of saying someone was surveying my land. He told me 2 nights before the fire. Laura was dressed in hat sunglasses, scarf irrespective of the weather. She purchased gloves, long matches, and a 2-gallon jug. Cash paid and left with nothing but silence. Not against the law, but damning for someone who doesn't have a farm or garden. Ethan printed out a time-stamped receipt and a still. I sat in my truck pieces falling into place. Laura wasn't smart. She was basing things on unchecked apathy. I was not impressed by her theatrics. I simply wanted it documented next. I went through Old Man Carter's ring cam, which recorded the road at the back of my property. Over root beer and peanuts, he replayed the tape. At 1:42 a.m., a silver SUV sped by. Lights off, pulled up near my land. A hooded woman stepped out, hesitated, and reached in something out of the back. A flash, then orange explosion. She ran, slammed the door, and fled. The license plate was unreadable, but I knew the dented bumper and faded HOA sticker. Laura's Ford Edge. I had video receipts and soon lab results. It wasn't enough for an arrest, but it was enough for me. I took Cinder, my retired arson dog, to the scene. She sniffed lazily, then planted her ground at the hole, the tree line and trash cans on the other side. 3 accelerant warnings. Dogs do not lie. I packed the gloves and cap and dropped them off with a lab contact owed on a previous case. He promised results within 48 hours. That evening, Laura had a neighborhood progress barbecue. I brought potato salad and remained silent. She preached property values and safety, smiling as if she hadn't burned my tractor. When I mentioned the suspicion of the fire crews, her smile dropped. She deflected the subject I walked home with. Cinder building the case itself. The silence that evening was deafening. I sat in the dark, coffee-cold cinder on the floor. Outside my standby tractor under cameras. A GPS-tracked fuel can, a UV dye trap, and a mic in a birdhouse I was waiting. At dawn, Sheriff Dan Wells, an old army buddy, knocked. He had a folder with my evidence, Laura at the co-op. My report dated. He told me it was solid but queried why I waited. I explained I required airtight Laura's contacts would kill a weak case. He submitted it special review. No leaks, and advised me to watch my back. Laura would not leave quietly. At the courthouse, I discovered Laura had written 75 fines, many to non-HOA residents, skimming money into her personal account. A scam in bylaws. I made copies of records presenting an obstacle. At the co-op, Ethan gave me a ride to provide me with a copy receipt Laura's nephew Jake bought the same things. And an hour later, I stopped by Jake's trailer. He told me Laura told him it was for a project and don't be noisy. I cautioned him being quiet would make him an accomplice. He clammed up. That night, I left a decoy folder labeled fire case evidence on my porch. GPS detected at 2 a.m. A hooded individual took it and fled. The gadget took us to an HOA shed. Dan and I discovered it in a trash can. Coffee grounds and a protein bar wrapper in HOA video recorded Laura's niece Mia at the shed. Sloppy, desperate Dan procured a warrant for Laura arson obstruction fraud. Her empire was crumbling. The day after her arrest, the neighborhood humped. Strangers waved, cars stopped to ask about me. I'd become tractor guy to the guy who took down HOA queen. I didn't mind the peace, not the glory. But Laura's pride still smoldered. Dan called for someone burglarized evidence storage. Nothing was taken. Dan had copies, but the cameras weren't rolling. Laura's cousin, a councilman, demanded that she be released, accusing me of an illegal sting. He didn't know Dan had signed off each step. That evening, a pickup pulled over there, same one that brought Laura's fence panels. It fled off slowly. I noted the plates. Arsonists get crazy. The second time I called a state fire marshal friend to inspect Laura's HOA books. He started calmly. I left the decoy tractor with a sign evidence review, pending a pressure sensor on the seat wired to my phone. At 3:15 a.m., it buzzed. A figure tore at the sign got on board and froze cold when floodlights shone on pink sneakers moss. She ran away. I had her on record, tampering with evidence. Dan blew it up to the DA. The marshal found thousands in fines, pocketed under Laura's Venmo doctored violations, even kids' chalk drawings. The HOA board took away from her refunded fines and curbed its power. Neighbors brought lemonade equipment, a kid's drawing of Cinder in a fire helmet. Justice weighed heavy real at Laura's arraignment. I sat in the back with Cinder. Laura pleaded not guilty, her lawyer blaming hormonal stress. The courtroom laughed. Charges grew. Arson, fraud, tampering. Her hands were shaking, spilling water. Outside, one of her neighbors grumbled an apology for signing her petition. I nodded. Grudges distract energy. Days later, Laura's husband wrote angry, stating he did not know. She was so consumed with control he was giving up. I filed the letter away at a speech to high school kids. I told them, fire reveals truth and justice. Sometimes quietly walks a dog. Neighbors presented ribbon and new tractor and all. I mowed the fields slowly, savoring peace. Weeks later, another letter came. Loris Raw scribbled. She knew the fire nourished by resentment of my freedom, my strength. I wanted to demolish what I could never build. She wrote, I stored it away, part of the story. On the podium at the fire station, I lectured recruits, fire speaks lies, and worst of all, awaiting truth to fall. And driving home, I had seen a new sign. Welcome to Pine View, Ranchland. Honor the land, honor the people. Sunflowers bloomed where the tractor burned. Somebody planted it, neighbor, a child. I built a porch laid out, every board with care. Cinder staked out her spot. The sun set, gold birds chirped agreement. Laura's fire did not break me. It lit a path to justice. Demonstrating strength stands firm, and the longest burn burns slowly.